hatred of my flight seems fairly unanimous. The fear, the disgust he saw on people's faces.
Well, that's the sort of thing I want the game to show more of.
Exactly.
And this is a bit of like having the right type of teeth, you know? So the idea of okay, if you do it badly, you could run into a problem. But it's, you know, it's obviously, it's not racist to have racism in a story, because that's the sort of thing that can happen in a big world that you're telling a story in.
Yes.
Yes, because it's a fucking story. So the opinion of the small folk.
Yeah.
Maybe I guess that's like what in a historical setting you refer to the plebeians as. But like, yeah, they are going to look at Death Knights and think, you're fucking terrible. You should all be rounded up and gotten rid of. You Death Knights. Yeah. You dragons, you burnt my dad. I hate you. Right? So that's the sort of thing that makes makes a world feel believable. Right? Like, you know, there's just a version of everyone's like, oh yeah, awesome, dragons are cool. And then there's, say, I don't know, like a character in Game of Thrones or something who has a dragon, and they now have to deal with the fact that their dragon ate someone's sheep. Yeah. And that makes it feel a little bit more real, I suppose. So I guess that's just why I like to see this. It's why I like people being a bit creeped out by the Drakthir whenever the Drakthir walk into Stormwind, which I guess is...
Between people saying do a barrel roll.
Yeah, because if you live in Stormwind, you've really...
There's just a dragon walking around now.
Yeah, I think the thing that will make... The thing that makes the world feel good is like that you get a sense that somebody who's living in Stormwind does know that like just over there in Red Ridge, there's a big black dragon floating around doing a bunch of bad shit in the past, and they're going to feel really bad about that. And I guess that's one of those things where, and this is always really hard to do, and whenever your characters are heroic, they're larger than life, even a character who feels a bit more grounded like Talia, like, she is still the daughter of Mr. Crispy. And that's pretty major. But, you know, you so rarely get the story of just the dude in the town. And this, I guess, does lead me back to what was my favorite quest, I think, even though it was mechanically very simple and the mechanics were entirely designed to communicate to you the futility of the guy's situation. But the Scourge thing in Red Ridge. Yep. That was a really, really good quest. And there was only one way it could mechanically end, because he was fucked.
Just to do it like?
Yeah, you only have a few buttons for your shotgun, and you cannot kill these zombies. And that, I think, was really... it was just like so effective to people, because you get that sense of like, oh yeah, my character chews through these things. You know, me having a gun with all of my abilities and a pet that I can basically telekinetically tell to attack, and all these crazy things that I have, and just fucking Joe with a shotgun and he's totally screwed. That feels great. And whenever all of the people are throwing tomatoes at a Death Knight whenever they walk into Stormwind, that's because those people know that, like, yeah, they can kill this Death Knight, maybe if they all tried to rush the Death Knight at once, but even then, maybe the Death Knight would just raise them up as ghouls.
Yeah, we just drop Death and Decay, and that's how, like...
Yeah, so, like, to an average citizen, that's terrifying. To the average citizen, a Drakthir evoker could... You know that scene in the Boys, that, like, little, I guess Homelander kind of considering what he could do, where he's like, I could just laser eye through all of you. Yeah. And there'd be like thousands of dead people. I mean, a Drakthir with disintegration could just go, meh, and Godzilla a crowd. Yeah. So that's why I like a little bit of, I guess the way I put it, this is like Edge that feels very, very grounded, very real. And it doesn't feel needlessly like... Oh yeah, there's no tomatoes thrown at the Drakthir, but I'm fairly sure there were a few comments from people who are just like a little bit sort of suspicious.
I think they underplayed that, I think, in a way that's kind of... I'd like them to have gone full Death Knight with that.
Well, Tyrannian has the Secret Services basically...
Scope
them out too.
Shaw's like, yeah, we'll just watch you the whole time. And there's, I think if you pay attention, there's a lot of people who actually like are SI7 agents watching you if you look close enough, which I think is really fun.
Yeah. So
It's just
I think
it's not as big or as obvious as everyone shouting at you and you've been covered in debuffs. Like you're covered in rotten fruit, so you smell. You're like, that rotten fruit would be an improvement on a Death Knight, but anyway.
So it's like some events in WoW's recent past have felt like a bit like needlessly edgy or like edgy for the sake of it and not particularly believable to players. You could think about that in the context of some of those Teldrassil things, but then if you remember playing Teldrassil,
was one of my favorite moments.
The one bit of Teldrassil that actually worked at selling that was when you're tasked with saving people and
rescue everyone, like.
Yeah, and it's mechanically impossible. You cannot do it. And
quest still in the game, by the way, definitely.
That's really unfortunate. So
one of the best things I've ever done.
That one quest, that is the bit that really like successfully sold Teldrassil. And if the rest of Teldrassil had felt like that, and was kind of like done to that level of detail, and really gave us like the actual human perspective, you know what I mean, not literally human, on everything, then like that would have been really successful. So I guess it's like we as players, we're gallivanting around being these super, I mean, compared to the average person, right? Super intelligent, basically above everything, commands a dragon, actually has about 500 dragons in the back pocket at any given time, has magic, has all this stuff. Like it's so disconnected from the average like townsfolk or something like that. And you even compare that to like back in Warcraft 3, where actually in Warcraft 3
a lot of Warcraft 3 was doing that. Not a lot, but like there's a decent couple of bits as Arthas. Obviously that's how they framed it beautifully, right? It was, what's the first thing you do as Arthas? Help a town. What's the first thing you do as Arthas when he's a wee bit worse? You go and wreck a town.
Just a wee bit.
Yeah. And that is like, I'm doing the opposite of what I did. That hit really hard for people. So it's like they need to be able to actually get that same vibe out there.
Yeah, and I guess that's why I see people being disgusted at Black Dragons and think like, yeah, that's actually that's strong storytelling. There's like there's Rathian cognitively coming to terms with the the sins of his people's past, but then
so many, it's just pure daddy issues. Like
and then you have the big reality of now Rathian is stood in front of someone whose family was killed. And that I think is where you can get very strong storytelling, and I think that's where you can like make the World of Warcraft feel very real. And I guess when you kind of like look through some of the novels, like that's one of the things that I guess their format is able to do very successfully, whereas within the game they'll maybe need to contrive a situation where you, the player, are sort of going and helping someone who's a bit more in need in a way that will make that feel quite real, or they need to find a way of giving you control of a regular person, like in that Red Ridge quest in the Kyrian campaign, which, it's kind of funny. That quest is strong enough that I would actually elevate Kyrian to being my favorite Covenant campaign, purely because...
Was that not a side quest? Or was it a campaign? I think I might have a side quest.
I think it was a campaign quest. No, it was a campaign quest. But anyway, that's my point in a very long-winded fashion, which is just to say, this is the sort of edge that I think is not needlessly edgy. I think this is the sort of edge that is keeping Azeroth feeling like a well-lived-in place where things have consequences, and I really like that.
Yeah, it is. It is unfortunate this is a short story on the website, but it's the thing where it works so well because it's available in this format, the just prose and internal monologuing, where it's very hard to get that in game because the only way to get that in game is to turn our characters into either a spy, a fly on the wall, or obviously that's what the Echo in FF14 is used to extremely good extent for. Just, hey, we need you to be in a scene that doesn't make sense for your character to be in. Haha, plot device. And that's obviously like why they get away with that. So the other way they would do it in World of Warcraft would be we'd have to be Rathion's confidant. And that would feel weird for Rathion, the guy who's so obsessed with keeping up appearances and revealing himself and who he really is to no one, to the point where his bodyguards were called Left and Right. That's not the real names. Obviously not. That's the whole, they're not actually, they're tools as opposed to friends in that way. He's not going to open himself. They're just, there's a Volpera walking around, but like, Arathon, how's it going? He's like, fuck me, I've been on the sauce, something fierce this week. And it's all just because I keep thinking, what if I turn out like my dad? And is this fox going? Yep. Arathon, I don't understand. But good internal monologue, I'm very happy you told me. That wouldn't make any sense.
Yeah.
It would work okay sometimes to an extent. But it's just like, nah,
I'd say it does bring up a very interesting, like just storytelling thing in general, right? Like the internal monologue it's one of the most powerful things, I think. And it's quite funny because whenever it's done in a movie as a voiceover, you just kind of roll your eyes like, oh man, really? This is some show don't tell shit. Yeah, the cinematic cut of Blade Runner, the original Blade Runner comes to mind. Oh, wow. A good example that I think a lot of people in the audience will probably know, though, is Jon Snow from from Game of Thrones and subsequent books, where whenever Jon is on the old television in the HBO show, sometimes he can feel a bit mopey and weird. I still think he works, by the way, in the TV show, but you see Jon in, in the books where he's a point of view character and you're actually getting internally how he thinks. I mean, that's where it's really strong. For another good example, I've really, enjoyed the Expanse. I need to get into the books. And one of the things where, I'm not just thinking to myself, I've already seen that story on the TV. I don't need to read the books. Well, no, in the books, I'm going to get internal. I mean, obviously the story will be a bit different, but also I will get internal monologue, and that will probably make some characters pretty powerful. So it's a really hard thing to do in games. Narrative in games is so goddamn hard. Like, you have to, I guess, like with what we've done, you have to put so many points in narrative that, narrative first from the core structure of your game. That doing it in MMOs, you're always sacrificing something. We both really like Final Fantasy XIV. I do think though that if somebody rolls their eyes at that game and says, "Oh, it's just a VN," I mean,
you go, yeah.
You kind of do just have to say, "Oh yeah." I mean, VNs actually can be really good because sometimes limitations are incredible for creativity. But you look at that with FF14, you're like, yeah, this game has undoubtedly made some sacrifices in order to have this word count.
Yeah.
And in return for those sacrifices, we have this very strong emotional experience that people get because the story really lands for the people who do make it through that. And a lot of people will get filtered out because they maybe want a different format of story.
They want something else, literally.
Yeah, something that maybe you could even say something that uses a few more aspects of the medium. And that's kind of fair.
That's why I think specifically the Carrion Quest and the Teldrassil Quest were so perfect, because they're like, hey, you have to do something. Good luck, you can't. And that forced fail state, or something suddenly having a spike in difficulty, like one specific Endwalker quest that people complained about because it was way different and way hard and fucking terrifying, to the point there were people posting on Reddit about how it was like a traumatic event to them. Oh, and they had fucking PTSD trigger because it wrecked them starting in
Garlemald.
Yeah,
that's one of the
that is one of the peak moments of something you can do in video games alone. You can only do it in video games.
Yeah,
and it's a risk to do because it's really heavy and it's hard to execute, but it's brilliant. But it's hard to actually do that. They need to make that decision more often, but it's
so that's where I'll definitely say fair play to the Blizzard that shipped Shadowlands. That Red Ridge quest is great game design, and a really good example of that that's happened in the past is the ending of Halo Reach.
Oh yeah,
right.
Oh, just yeah. I haven't played it. I know it culturally from hearing other people talk about it. And even just hearing about it happens, and that sounds beautiful.
Yeah, I guess spoiler warning for a small period of time, but that game has been out for a decade, I guess. Oh my god, that's weird to say. Yeah. And it's in the Master Chief Collection, which, by the way, I would heartily recommend to any prospective person who wants to play some video games. But just so you understand, now Halo Reach, actually, it is one of my, there's a lot that I like about it. I also do have some significant issues with it. I think there's just some bits where it's underwritten. It could do with a lot more work for its characters. But It's one of those things that like it falls apart a little in some of the details, but like big picture, it's all quite strong. It gets its like tone and its mood right, and yeah, so basically your team of people has some shit to do, and at the very end, it's a thing of fantastic. My mission is completed. Cortana is in that big spaceship. It's going to fly away and turn into Halo 1.
Yep.
Oh, I'm stuck in the ground.
Where's my evac?
Yeah, I'm stuck in the ground. Also, that ship was the last ship out.
Yep.
And it's just the way that it's displayed is objective, survive.
See, I even knew that.
Yeah.
Like,
and like that's great because when it says survive, it just says that in the way that the game will have presented any other normal objective to you. And so that's what makes it strong.
Yeah, because it doesn't break any form of how you think about the game or how you're framing it. It is fully within the realm of the video game, and it hits you like a fucking brick. Another
good example of that is whenever it's one of the bits in Legacy of the Void, StarCraft 2, where I actually forget exactly what it is, but your ship is like hacked. And the way that it's represented is your UI turns off. And it's a very different case, but it's a very similar thing where they really successfully make you feel like you're on that ship because suddenly the button that you use to interact with the ship and your crew is just gone.
Yeah.
And it's done really well. And these are the things that only games can do. So yeah, whenever Blizzard, they basically did a objective survive in the Red Ridge quest, and that was absolutely brilliant. So all these little things that build out the world, make it feel real, really show what a dragon is to a normal person in the world. That's all really strong. And I suppose it also does make us think of the more grounded stories, including some rooted in, the Horde and dragons, like Stonemasons, right? In our timeline, they turned into the Stonemasons. In their timeline, they turned into Defias Brotherhood. There you go. So, it's all pretty cool.